Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And we also have breaking news, Jim, and not a joke breaking news like how many states love Die Hard, which is very important news, but perhaps even more important for our purposes here, we know who the new senator from Arizona is going to be. It should come as no surprise. It will, in fact, be Martha McSally, who came in second place in November in the Arizona Senate race to Kyrsten Sinema. But with John Kyle announcing just a few days ago that he wasn't going to stay on as the interim senator beyond the end of the year, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey having to make another call. A lot of people expected this, given that McSally ran very well. Others said, well, maybe not such a great idea to give it to someone who just lost. There were some folks calling for Matt Salmon, for example, former congressman. But in the end, it's McSally, so no great surprise. What's your reaction?
You know, Greg, for the better part of a year, you and I, talked about this race with my. This was the clash of the titans, the activist, far left, anti-war type who demonized U.S. soldiers and said her state was the meth lab of democracy, against one of the highest-ranking female pilots in Air Force history. There can be only one. Wait, never mind. No, they can both be senator. It's like Oprah. You get a Senate seat, and you get a Senate seat. Everybody's a winner today.
Well, congratulations, Martha McSally. Now there's a fight. The Democrats think that she can't stay in there for 2 whole years. There's got to be an election scheduled sometime in 2019. We'll let them sort that out, but just want to let everyone know that has been resolved, at least in the short term. All right, on to our good martini now, Jim, and I know you're breathing a huge sigh of relief on this, both in reality and in jest, because now you can bust out those nunchucks if you ever go back to New York City. This is the Washington Post. Just blame Bruce Lee. Back in 1974, New York State decided to ban the possession of nunchucks as lawmakers feared they were becoming enticing tools of violence among hooligan children and street criminals who were exposed to the weapons on TV. They were so dangerous, lawmakers believed that not even karate teachers could keep them in a locker at home. But while being dangerous might have been a good enough reason then, it doesn't cut it anymore, as a federal judge ruled Friday. In a 32-page ruling, U.S. District Judge Pamela K. Chen struck down New York's nunchuck ban as unconstitutional, finding that nunchucks are protected under the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Chen concluded that nunchucks are commonly used by law-abiding citizens, for example, by karate enthusiasts, or for self-defense. So therefore, banning them outright runs afoul of the Second Amendment. The judge also applied a 2010 landmark Supreme Court ruling that extended the Second Amendment to state law. So, Jim, I don't know if we're going to get a campaign against assault nunchucks now or something like that, but not only can people who like nunchucks use this, it's a pretty strong defense for the Second Amendment, whether Judge Chen meant it that way or not when it comes to firearms.
Yeah, well, first of all, Greg, is there a single man out there of just about any age who has not taken 2 Italian pepperoni linked sausages, found them in the kitchen, and begun swinging them around, absolutely convinced that we looked like Bruce Lee and we're not actually looking ridiculous? The second thought, Greg, I had no idea that all this time Michelangelo of the Ninja Turtles was breaking the law in New York. The Ninja Turtles are in New York City. Yes, they're technically fictional. And yes, they don't technically exist, but this is one of those laws you don't even realize is on the books. And I'm glad it's being struck down as kind of a broader argument. We've talked about the Second Amendment and gun rights and the right to self-defense a lot of times. I periodically tell people this. Back when I lived in Washington, D.C., pre-Heller decision, not only was it illegal for a law-abiding citizen, no criminal record, no reason to think that I'd be a menace to myself or others. Not only was I banned from having a handgun, apparently I was in illegal possession of a medieval sword, which I said, if push came to shove, God forbid everybody ever tried to break in, I at least had the medieval sword. So I was well prepared if a dragon came through the door or something like that. I went back and I looked this. Not only that, for a long now, I guess pepper spray is legal in just about every state to own. Some of them have restrictions. Most of the time, you have to be at least 18 to purchase it. But up until about 2015, pepper spray was illegal in the state of Massachusetts. So you look at this and you realize this philosophy on gun control of, well, we can't let you have a gun because this is dangerous. You, the citizen, can't be trusted with that. If we let you have that, you're going to go out and commit crimes or hurt people. They apply that also, obviously, to knives and swords and all kinds of other things like that. And then, of course, it gets extended to pepper spray. Well, if you are somebody who has to walk through a bad neighborhood and you're afraid of being mugged, if you're a woman and you're afraid of being raped, if you're afraid of being assaulted, there are gangs, what the heck are you supposed to do? And this series of laws has done everything to say it's the same philosophy of guns of, well, we're going to ban this. And thus no one, thus we will, eliminate the possibility of crimes being committed with this particular device or instrument. Well, lo and behold, but the old saying, if you ban guns, if you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns. It's not like muggings stopped. It's not like crime stopped. All you did was you made sure that people who were possible victims did not have these tools of self-defense. So that is why I think this is a good decision and nominated for today's Good Martini. Look, right, self-defense is a right. It is a right of every, not just in the Constitution, but, people argue this is the first and most fundamental human right, because if you don't have that, it's very easy to take away all of your other rights, including your right to life. So amen to this judge, and I'm glad to see. Look, I do not expect a great deal of terrible ninja kung fu fights breaking out all over New York State right now, but I think it's a good change in the philosophy of the law, that the American people are citizens, they are grown adults, they can be trusted to handle things responsibly. And if they don't handle things responsibly, then you can charge them with crimes. Blanket bans of devices like this are nuisances and so rarely enforced, they really shouldn't be on the books.
Good news. Good news coming from the courts, and good news for the Second Amendment. All right, let's move on to the bad martini now, Jim. The economy has been one of the really good things over the past year, almost 2 years now, but a lot of smart people think it might not last too much longer. A couple different stories here. First, CNBC, in a sharp change toward a darker outlook, respondents to the CNBC Fed survey have boosted the chance of recession next year to the highest level of the Trump presidency, reduced their support for the president's handling of the economy, and lowered their outlook for economic growth and Fed rate hikes, with some even flirting with the idea of a rate cut in 2019. Still, many of the 43 respondents, who include economists, fund managers, and strategists, also argued that the market has overdone it to the downside. But the chance of recession in the next 12 months rose to 23%, the second straight increase, and up from 19% in the prior survey. That's higher than the 19% long-run average for the 7-year-old survey and 9 points higher than the low of the Trump presidency. So you also have stories out there today about former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan. Not sure if there's another little burst of a bull market, and he says if there is one, or even if there's not, get ready to run for cover. That's not what you usually want to hear from Alan Greenspan.
Yeah, I wrote about this in today's Morning Jolt. I was not happy to write this. The economy has been one of the happy stories and a source of many of our good martinis over the last 2 years. If you're like me, you see a headline, stock market, Dow Jones Industrial Average down a jillion points. You clutch your heart for a second, check out your 401k maybe or something like that. But before you can do that, the next day it jumps back up at a million jillion instead of a jillion points. Oh, okay, all right, that looks pretty good. And so you're like, okay, these things usually work themselves out. It's generally an overreaction one way or the other. This stock market's probably going to be fine. Well, actually, no. It's probably going to be down S&P 500 down 4.8% for the year. That is bad, as the CNBC notes. That'd be the worst one since the financial crisis. And just, I think what's more is, you could have a not so great year or a very tumultuous year that ends up in the negative on the stock market. Just a lot more, that economic optimism we've had for the past 2 years has kind of dried up. And now some of this is just the matter of, the boom has been going on for something like 97 months. And we're kind of, every boom has to end at some point. So it could be a very short or mild recession. But just in general, you talk to the CEOs, you talk to everybody, you think there's a sense of a global slowdown and just, a variety of factors catching up to us. And look, if you think this administration's having a tough time before, well, that's happening as the economy is doing well. An economic slowdown on top of everything else, I think you'll see, even more nastiness, even more finger pointing in Washington. And, the country, ironically, while we've had a pretty good economic run, as I mentioned, these 97 months, the last 2 years, you've finally seen wage growth. Unemployment is very low. There's 7 million unfilled jobs. We've also seen this boom in suicides and opioid addiction and overall drug overdoses and other problems like that. these problems usually get worse during economic recession. So that could be really ominous down the road. Don't want to panic anybody, but it does look like there's a bit of a rattle in the engine of our economy, and something that our policymakers should be monitoring very closely.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about how presidents probably get too much credit when it's good, too much blame when it's bad, but that's kind of how it goes. If you're in office and there's a strong economy, you're usually going to get rewarded for that. Bill Clinton certainly did. President Reagan certainly did. And then when things go very badly, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, which wasn't really that bad, but the media certainly made it out that way. But it was still tough for a lot of people, and then that's the way that goes. And so I don't know how much is in the administration's control. The one thing that they do have control over that I think is contributing to this is probably the tariff issue, and we'll see how much uncertainty is existing because of that. Because the one thing I know about economics, which isn't much, is that people don't like uncertainty.
Yeah, well, boy, certainty was nice for 2 years, wasn't it? Actually, here's some certainty. Where that's a near certainty. Not much is going to get done with a Democratic House, Republican Senate, Republican president. So, what are you panicking about, Wall Street? At least from Washington.
That's right.
Lighten up.
Yeah.
Nothing will get done.
Yeah,
that's the good news.
Wall Street usually likes gridlock. All right, let's move on to our crazy martini now, Jim. And, a couple of years ago, this wouldn't have seemed so crazy. In fact, one of our favorite Democrats in Washington was Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman from Hawaii, because she had the temerity, as an Iraq war vet, to call out President Obama for how he refused to call the enemy what it really was, whether there was ISIS or anything else. He didn't like to actually mention radical Islam. And so whenever he would dodge the issue and the elephant in the room, she would say things like this.
If you look at some of the conversations that have happened during the summit and the president's speech that we heard just a few minutes ago, still I think it is a diversion from where we need to be focused. If you look at this broad focus on countering violent extremism, which is very hard to define, it's a diversion away from the actual threat coming from this radical Islamic ideology that exists not only for the United States, but really around the world.
And it wasn't just that. In 2016, she sided with Bernie Sanders, which isn't great from a conservative perspective, but she did so because she was so upset with how the DNC was clearly playing favorites with Hillary Clinton with the debate schedule and a whole lot of other things. And so you got to respect her for bucking her party when it is going to get some blowback from her party. But then, just when we thought we had a normal, rational Democrat, she ends up having a meeting with Bashar al-Assad, seems all buddy-buddy, and even comes home and largely defends him. Now Tulsi Gabbard is planning to run for president, it seems, according to BuzzFeed. She's taking all the steps that makes it look like she's going to do this. She has acknowledged that she's seriously considering a presidential bid. Her team is actively seeking to staff senior roles on a potential campaign. And so an announcement could come, I assume, about an exploratory committee as soon as this week, according to BuzzFeed. So, Jim, what do you make of Tulsi Gabbard being part of this menagerie of candidates?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the story you tell there, Greg, is a good example of how you should probably never fall too hard for a particular lawmaker. Sometimes they grow in office and improve and get better with time, and sometimes they get worse. And I think what's something worth noting about her trip to Syria and the meeting with Bashar Assad, it's kind of in light of a lot of our current relations with Putin, relations with Duterte and the Philippines, and meeting with Kim Jong-un. Look, yes, sometimes diplomacy and the real world ramifications of international relations require you to be a little bit nicer to a despot or to a brutal dictator or to somebody who's got a kind of hideous record on human rights and things like that for the greater good, right? A lot of this happened during the Cold War. Marcos in the Philippines and leaders like that. But the point is to never get all too comfortable with that, never to embrace that kind of mentality too fully, to kind of recognize that, look, maybe circumstances have forced you're forced into an alliance with Stalin in order to defeat Hitler. And maybe that's necessary to the effort to defeat Hitler. But you should never really kind of fool yourself about who you're partnering with. And then you should always look at the likes of Stalin clearly. And when she came back, she really kept saying about how, we really need to work with Assad. And it really got kind of, went from the look, if we want to bring the Syrian civil war to an end, maybe we need Assad at the table, to a slightly more full-throated embrace of Assad than you or I were comfortable with. And I think a lot of people were comfortable with. And once you've gassed your own people, I think you should be in your own category. But I thought about it, Greg, and I realized maybe what's that saying, when you're in a tough spot? Lean in, right? Don't hang a lampshade on your problem. Take your problem and turn it into an advantage. So, Greg, I've been thinking about how to help out the Gabbard 2020 campaign.
Oh.
And I came up with some slogans. First one, Gabbard 2020, because the situation is serious. Or, a couple of years ago, you may remember Barack Obama, the unofficial slogan, the audacity of hope. Well, Gabbard 2020, Bashar audacity. Yes, you can. All of these are free, Gabbard campaign. No, I'm letting you off easy. Actually, I'll send you a bill. Gabbard 2020, you'll see a side of her you never saw before. Or put simply, I think saying, Gabbard 2020, this campaign will be a gas. It's just a little too on the nose. So I decided to just observe Gabbard 2020. She and her friends have the right chemistry. And I just think it's, it really is remarkable. She probably will stand out on that stage because of her life experience. She's a woman. She's young. She's from Hawaii. Kind of interesting, but a very strange philosophy on foreign policy. And after having once been kind of a refreshing and somewhat critical voice of some Obama administration policies, seems to have been a very strange choice of foreign leaders to meet and, if not fully embrace, then I think have her relationship to Assad makes Obama look like a hardliner on the Iranians.
Yeah, that was really bizarre, especially given how forcefully she's spoken out against radical Islam. And Assad is obviously, I don't know if a puppet's the right word, but clearly in the pocket of the Iranians. And I don't know how you get more Islamic radical than the Iranian regime, but other than ISIS, I guess. But Jim, we'll call time there. We'll see if the Gabbard 2020 campaign chooses any of those slogans or picks up any momentum. There's going to be plenty of company on that stage. Talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and be sure to tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.